All right, today we're diving straight into a highly focused, evidence-led explainer on a really complex and, honestly, often misunderstood topic: the development of China's domestic immersion DUV lithography ecosystem, and how proposed U.S. export controls fit into the picture. Right up front, as of our analytical cutoff on July 30, 2026, we are keeping a strict, detached boundary here. We're going to separate officially promoted specifications and attributed media reports from actual verified commercial capabilities.
Okay, let's dive into this. The big analytical question driving our whole review today is this: what can we responsibly establish about China's reported domestic production, and how do proposed U.S. controls, specifically the Match Act, shape the regulatory context? It is absolutely crucial to draw a hard line between a flashy headline claim and a proven commercial baseline. We aren't here to spin a dramatic tech war narrative. We're just asking, what does the accessible evidence actually support?
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the evidence gap, move into official specs versus demonstrated production, then look at attributed trials and targets. After that, we'll cover the production engineering barrier, the proposed Match Act restrictions, and wrap up with scenarios and future indicators.
Starting off with Section 1, the evidence gap.
To really wrap our heads around the current state of China's immersion DUV capabilities, we've got to map out reality using a rigid evidence classification. It's kind of like sorting puzzle pieces. On the far left, we have confirmed facts, like the proposed U.S. Match Act, which is a verified, readable legislative document. Next up are official claims, things like the specs listed in the Chinese SMIC catalog. Sliding further down the certainty scale, we hit attributed claims. These are the reported corporate trials at foundries like SMIC, which, keep in mind, rely entirely on secondary media reporting. And finally, we have the massive category of unknowns, especially the true operational status of these machines. We really need to establish this baseline right away. A confirmed legislative fact is not the same as a government claim, and honestly, neither of those equals a verified production status.
Moving right along to Section 2, official specs versus demonstrated production.
Looking specifically at what the Chinese government is officially promoting for domestic procurement, we've got some exact figures to look at. Back in September 2024, a reproduction of an MIIT procurement catalog was published via Sina Finance. Now, it promoted a domestic RF lithography machine operating at a 193 nanometer wavelength, with a resolution of 65 nanometers or less and an overlay of 8 nanometers or less. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. We have to state clearly that these are officially promoted baseline specifications meant to guide domestic procurement. They are definitely not independent, verified records of high-volume manufacturing performance.
So what do those numbers actually mean for the tech itself? Well, resolution is simply the smallest printable feature a machine can achieve. Overlay is the alignment precision between successive pattern layers on a silicon wafer. And according to specialist analysis from TrendForce, an 8-nanometer overlay is physically inadequate for advanced sub-10-nanometer logic processes. This beautifully underscores our core theme today. A listed specification in a catalog just isn't proof of mature node commercial deployment.
All right, Section 3, attributed trials and targets.
Transitioning from government catalogs to the reported corporate activity inside China's semiconductor sector, a pretty specific chronology starts to emerge. And this brilliantly illustrates how the pieces fit together. Though we explicitly note that these details rely on intermediary sources, they completely lack direct foundry confirmation. In August 2023, Reuters, via Euronext, reported that Shanghai Aishengna was formed with a registered capital of 7 billion yuan to spearhead a state-backed lithography effort. Then, following that MIT catalog in 2024, the Financial Times, via Bits&Chips, reported that the foundry SMIC started trialing a tool from the startup Yuliangsheng in September 2025. Finally, The Information, via TrendForce, reported intended delivery targets of 5 units in 2026 and 20 in 2027. So you can see how the corporate establishment lines up chronologically with these intended delivery targets. But again, remember, these are unverified forecasts, not proven deliveries.
Next up, Section 4, the production engineering barrier. We really need to talk about the physical reality of lithography here and why taking a machine from a functional prototype to a stable production tool is just an immense, towering hurdle. The grueling pipeline of semiconductor equipment integration dictates that a machine absolutely does not jump straight from prototype to printing chips at mass scale. It has to go through installation, rigorous qualification, pilot use, and only then maybe high-volume manufacturing, or HVM. Based on the primary evidence we actually have access to, we simply cannot confirm that any reported Chinese immersion DUV tools have successfully crossed the finish line into that HVM stage.
And the reasons for this gap? They're literally rooted in physics.
Independent analysis from Bits&Chips points out that general immersion lithography faces some brutal hydrodynamic challenges. To put this into perspective, these machines basically have to operate with the acceleration forces of a fighter jet, all while maintaining the microscopic precision of a surgeon. It's wild! When you push a wafer stage to commercial speeds, you risk microbubble formation and water droplet trails, which instantly introduce defects. On top of that, peer-reviewed research from SPIE shows that applying multi-patterning techniques to get finer nodes drastically ramps up the process complexity and the risk of edge placement errors. These aren't just local issues, they're universal engineering constraints that any high-speed commercial scanner has to overcome.
Moving on to Section 5, Proposed Match Act Restrictions.
Shifting our focus over to the U.S. regulatory environment, it is incredibly important to explicitly frame the Match Act as a proposed piece of legislation. It is not enacted law right now. The proposed statutory language of H.R. 8170 is highly specific. It proposes, and I quote, license requirements for the export of all applicable items to any covered facility and the servicing of all applicable items at any covered facilities with a licensing policy of denial. This text clearly lays out the exact regulatory mechanism being considered to restrict the ongoing maintenance of foreign tools at specific Chinese facilities.
Tracking its legislative status for a second, the Match Act was advanced by the House Foreign Affairs Committee on April 22, 2026. It actually includes a 150-day mechanism to try and get allied alignment on these controls. But we really must reinforce this point. The cessation of servicing is a proposed statutory mechanism. It's a conditional downstream effect that entirely depends on the bill passing into law, the implementing regulations being adopted, and allied governments actually getting on board. It is absolutely not a verified current reality.
Let's move to Section 6, Scenarios and Future Indicators, and see how this builds.
So how are analysts interpreting this mix of unverified technical progress and proposed U.S. policy? Well, there are two main bounded interpretations here. On one side, TrendForce offers what we'll call a strategic alternative interpretation. They look at the reported corporate consolidation and foundry trials as an organized, deliberate effort by China to build a completely alternative domestic supply chain to front-run U.S. restrictions. On the flip side, we have the commercial limitation interpretation, which is supported by Bits&Chips. This perspective emphasizes that the brutal physical and hydrodynamic constraints of high-volume manufacturing severely limit the actual economic viability of early-generation domestic tools, basically framing them more as prototypes than mature one-to-one replacements.
Building on those two interpretations, we can sketch out two highly conditional scenarios. Scenario A is the extended pilot phase. Basically, if domestic prototypes really struggle with defectivity and export controls don't change, foundries will probably just relegate these domestic tools to extended pilot testing while relying heavily on their existing foreign machines. Scenario B, though, assumes the implementation of the proposed servicing restrictions. If the Match Act actually passes and foreign tools begin to degrade because they can't get servicing or spare parts, Chinese foundries might hypothetically attempt a much broader integration of their domestic tools, despite their unproven status. And that could seriously disrupt advanced node output.
To navigate these scenarios responsibly, we need a really disciplined monitoring framework. So what should you take away from this? Keep your eyes on the legislative progress of the Match Act, working its way through the U.S. Congress. Watch for official primary foundry disclosures from companies like SMIC or CXMT regarding verified production integrations. And definitely track any future MIIT catalog updates. Direct manufacturer documentation and verified deliveries, those are the only ways we're going to resolve our current operational unknowns. We'll leave you with this final, critical thought. Given the massive, towering engineering gap between a functional prototype and true commercial high-volume manufacturing, will official foundry disclosures eventually confirm the viability of these domestic machines, or will conditional export policies, like the proposed Match Act, completely redefine the global supply chain first? The evidence to definitively answer that just doesn't exist yet, but hey, now you know exactly what indicators to watch for. Thanks for joining this explainer, stay curious, and keep an eye on the verified data.